Life is never a straight and predictable road. It is full of turns, rises, and sudden drops that we cannot always prepare for. At some point, each of us faces moments when we feel surrounded by uncertainty and difficulty. Perhaps it comes as a financial struggle, when bills pile up and we do not know how to make ends meet. Perhaps it comes as illness, our own or that of someone we love, shaking the sense of safety we once had. Perhaps it comes as loneliness, heartbreak, or conflict within the family. Or it may come in the form of a global crisis, pandemics, wars, or natural disasters that remind us how fragile life can be. During such times, one reaction seems almost universal: worry. Worry creeps into our minds, keeping us awake at night, running endless circles of what if thoughts. We imagine every possible disaster and prepare for the worst, even while our bodies sit still in the present moment. This worry weighs heavily, draining our strength, and often makes hard times even harder. It is natural that when life feels uncertain, our minds rush to create stories of what might happen next. This is our brain's way of trying to protect us. But as many of us have experienced, endless worrying rarely protects us at all. Instead, it increases fear and paralyzes action. We can spend hours worrying, but the problem we feared either never arrives, or it arrives in a way we could never have predicted. Worry is like carrying a heavy bag of stones on our back while walking uphill. The bag does not lighten our path or bring us to safety. It only slows us down and makes us weaker. Yet even when we know this, we find it so difficult to stop worrying. It feels almost automatic, like a reflex. The question then arises, is there another way to meet hard times? A way that gives us strength rather than takes it away? This is where the wisdom of Buddhism can offer a gentle but powerful guide. For more than 2,000 years, people have turned to the teachings of the Buddha not as a matter of belief, but as a source of practical wisdom for living. The Buddha never promised a life free from difficulty. In fact, he spoke openly about the truth that suffering and struggle are part of the human condition. But at the same time, he showed that it is possible to live in the middle of these challenges without being crushed by them. His teachings are not about running away from problems or pretending they do not exist, but about transforming the way we relate to them. In this sense, Buddhism is less about religion in the conventional sense and more about understanding life in a deeper way. When we understand clearly, worry begins to lose its grip. The purpose of this lecture is to explore how Buddhist wisdom can help us worry less, especially when life feels hard and uncertain. We will not be speaking in abstract terms or repeating complicated words that only belong in old scriptures. Instead, we will bring these timeless insights into simple language that connects directly with daily life. What you will find is that Buddhist wisdom is not distant or mysterious. It speaks to the very heart of the human experience. It shows us that although we cannot control every event in life, we can learn to control the way we meet those events. We can build a mind that is calm, clear, and strong, even in the middle of difficulty. It is important to understand from the very beginning that the aim here is not to erase worry completely. To expect that would be unrealistic, and in some ways, unhelpful. Worry, after all, comes from the natural desire to protect ourselves and those we love. But what we can do is change our relationship with worry. Instead of letting it dominate our lives and pull us into endless circles of fear, we can learn to observe it, soften it, and let it pass more easily. We can learn to distinguish between wise concern and unhelpful anxiety. We can discover a kind of inner balance that makes us more resilient, more compassionate, and more capable of taking real action when action is needed. This is the freedom that Buddhist wisdom points us toward, not a life without problems, but a life where problems no longer break our spirit. So as we begin this journey together, imagine that you are sitting with a friend who has lived through many storms in life. That friend does not deny that storms are frightening, but with a gentle voice, they say, you do not have to be swept away by the storm. You can learn to stand steady, to see clearly, and even to find peace while the winds blow. This is the spirit of what we will explore in the pages ahead. The teachings of Buddhism, when understood in their simple essence, are like that gentle friend. They do not promise to fix the outside world, but they show us how to take care of the inner world. They remind us that strength does not always come from control, but often from letting go. They remind us that peace does not come from escaping reality, but from facing reality with an awakened heart. In the sections that follow, we will look closely at what worry really is, why it arises, and why it holds such power over us. We will explore the Buddhist view of life's uncertainty and how this perspective can ease our fear. We will uncover the roots of worry in our own attachments and expectations, and then turn to the practical tools that Buddhist practice offers for cultivating peace of mind. These tools are not distant theories, but simple ways of living that anyone can try, no matter their background or beliefs. Finally, we will learn how to apply these teachings in the very moments when life feels hardest, so that they become real and alive in daily experience. By the end, my hope is that you will carry with you a different way of seeing your own struggles, one that allows you to breathe a little more freely, to rest a little more deeply, and to trust that even in the darkest times, worry does not have to rule your life. Worry is something so familiar to all of us that we hardly stop to question what it really is. It slips into our lives like a shadow, often without our permission, and suddenly we find ourselves trapped in long chains of thoughts about the future. At its heart, worry is the habit of rehearsing possible troubles before they even arrive. It is the mind running ahead of the present moment, spinning stories of what could go wrong, and circling back to them again and again. Unlike clear planning, which looks at a situation and calmly considers what can be done, worry is restless and repetitive. It is as if the mind keeps pacing back and forth in the same narrow room, wearing down the floorboards with its constant steps, but never actually leaving the room to face what is outside. To understand worry more deeply, it helps to see what it does to us. Imagine lying in bed at night, trying to rest, but your thoughts will not stop. You replay a conversation with your boss and imagine all the ways you might be criticized tomorrow. You picture yourself failing, losing your job, and then you leap further into imagining how you will not be able to pay rent, how your family might be disappointed, and how everything could collapse. By the time you notice, your body is tense, your chest feels tight, and sleep is impossible. The situation itself has not changed. You are still lying in the safety of your bed, but your mind has created a storm that feels as real as any outside threat. This is the power of worry. It brings suffering into the present moment even before anything has actually happened. One of the painful effects of worry is that it steals energy from us. When we worry, we spend mental and emotional strength on things that are not happening now. We may believe that by worrying, we are preparing. But in truth, worry often makes us less prepared. It scatters our focus and leaves us tired before we even take the first step to address the problem. Instead of thinking clearly and calmly, we become clouded and shaky. It is as if we try to cross a river, but we carry a bag filled with heavy stones on our back. Each stone is a what-if thought. What if I fail? What if I get sick? What if I lose someone? What if I never succeed? These stones do not help us cross the river. They only pull us down and make the journey harder. Yet worry is not simply a mistake or a weakness. It is rooted in something very human, the desire to be safe. Our ancestors, thousands of years ago, needed to think ahead in order to survive. If they did not imagine danger, they might not notice the signs of a predator or prepare for harsh weather. In this way, worry once served a purpose. It sharpened attention to threats. But in modern life, where many of our dangers are not immediate but imagined, this ancient habit often works against us. Instead of saving our lives, it drains them of peace. Instead of sharpening awareness, it blunts it. We are left stuck between two worlds, not fully in the present where action can be taken, and not really in the future either, since the future we imagine is only a guess. From a Buddhist perspective, worry can be seen as part of the wider truth that life is full of unease. It is one form of the stress that arises whenever the mind struggles against the uncertainty of existence. What makes worry so painful is not only the fear of what might happen, but the lack of control we feel. The more we try to control the future with our thoughts, the more powerless we realize we are, because the future cannot be fully shaped by our will. This realization makes us worry even more, and the cycle continues. We could say that worry is the mind's attempt to grab hold of clouds. The tighter we squeeze, the more they slip through our fingers, and the more frantic we become. It is important to distinguish between worry and wise concern. Wise concern looks at reality, accepts what is happening, and then calmly considers what steps can be taken. For example, if there is a chance of heavy rain, wise concern might lead you to carry an umbrella. But worry goes much further. It imagines storms that may never come, floods that may never happen, and then keeps you trapped in fear even when the sky above is still clear. Wise concern is like checking the road before you cross. Worry is like refusing to cross at all because you imagine every possible accident. When we understand this difference, we begin to see that worry is not the same as responsibility or care. It is not a sign of love or strength, but often a sign of fear that has grown out of proportion. Another way to understand worry is to notice how it lives in the body. When we are caught in worry, our shoulders rise, our stomach tightens, our breathing becomes shallow. This is the body's way of preparing for danger. But since the danger is imagined and not real, the body remains in tension for no reason. Over time, this tension builds into chronic stress, which can harm health and weaken the immune system. In this way, worry does not only live in the mind, it shapes our physical state, making hard times even harder to endure. So, what do we learn when we look closely at worry? We learn that it is natural, but not useful. We learn that it comes from the mind's attempt to protect itself, but it often creates more harm than good. We learn that it is not the same as careful planning or wise concern, but a cycle that traps us in fear. Most of all, we learn that worry feeds on uncertainty, on the fact that life cannot be fully controlled. The more we fight this truth, the more worry grows. But the moment we begin to understand it, even just a little, the grip of worry begins to loosen. We start to see that maybe there is another way to meet life's difficulties, a way that does not exhaust us but supports us. This is the first step to truly understand what worry is and how it functions. Only with this understanding can we begin to transform it into something lighter, something that no longer rules our minds. When we look closely at the root of worry, we find that much of it comes from our struggle with uncertainty. Human beings want life to be predictable. We want tomorrow to resemble today, and we want the good things we enjoy to last forever. Yet life does not work this way. Change is constant. Conditions shift. Seasons turn. People come into our lives and people leave. Bodies grow, age, and eventually pass away. Fortunes rise and fall. Health appears and disappears. No matter how much we try to build walls of security around us, uncertainty always finds a way through. This is not a mistake or a flaw in life. It is the very nature of existence. Buddhist wisdom begins by pointing directly to this truth. Instead of promising stability in a world that is always shifting, it teaches us to see the shifting clearly and to live wisely within it. Imagine standing by a river. The water flows endlessly, never stopping, never holding the same shape for even a moment. To demand that the river remain still would be to misunderstand its nature. In the same way, to expect life to stay the same, to resist all change, is to misunderstand what life is. Much of our suffering comes not from the changes themselves, but from our refusal to accept that change is unavoidable. We do not want loved ones to grow old, but they do. We do not want wealth to disappear, but sometimes it does. We do not want our own bodies to weaken, but eventually they will. The more tightly we cling to permanence, the more painful every shift becomes. This may sound discouraging at first, but if we reflect more deeply, we see that uncertainty is not only a source of fear, it is also the source of possibility. Because things change, suffering can lessen. Because conditions are not fixed, joy can arise again after sorrow. Because life does not stand still, new opportunities can open when old ones close. If everything were frozen, if nothing ever shifted, there would be no growth, no healing, no transformation. The same uncertainty that makes us anxious also gives us hope. The difference lies in how we view it. When we resist uncertainty, it feels like a threat. When we learn to accept it, it becomes a teacher. Consider the way seasons move. Winter is cold and bare, but we know that spring will follow. We do not panic that the trees have lost their leaves, because we trust that in time they will bloom again. Yet when it comes to our own lives, we often forget this wisdom. We treat every hardship as if it will last forever. We fear that the current difficulty will never end. Buddhist teaching reminds us that nothing, no matter how heavy, stays forever. Hard times pass just as surely as good times pass. Worry grows when we believe that trouble is permanent, but clarity comes when we remember that all things shift. Uncertainty also teaches us humility. We cannot control everything. No matter how carefully we plan, there will always be events outside our reach. This truth can feel frightening, but it can also be freeing. If we can accept that we are not in charge of every outcome, we release ourselves from the impossible burden of trying to manage the whole universe. We learn to focus on what we can do, our thoughts, our actions, our responses, while letting go of the rest. In this way, uncertainty becomes less of a weight and more of a guide. It shows us where our real responsibility lies and where it does not. Imagine someone who loses a job. At first, uncertainty strikes hard. What will I do? How will I survive? The natural response is fear. But if this person can see uncertainty more clearly, they might realize the loss of one path makes space for another. A door has closed, but perhaps another door will open. Many people look back later and say, at the time, losing that job felt like a disaster, but it led me to something better. This is not magic. It is simply the nature of change. What seems dark today may become the soil for growth tomorrow. In hard times, remembering the truth of uncertainty helps us worry less because it shifts our perspective. Instead of believing that life has betrayed us, we begin to see that life is simply moving. As it always does, changing, flowing, unfolding. Instead of thinking, this pain will never end, we remind ourselves, this too is part of the river, and it will pass. This does not mean we become passive or indifferent. Rather, it means we act with wisdom. We do what we can to face difficulties, but we no longer add the extra weight of demanding that life be unchanging. We no longer exhaust ourselves by fighting reality. At its deepest level, the Buddhist view of uncertainty invites us to live fully in the present moment. If the future is uncertain, then worry cannot solve it. The only place we have any real power is here and now. To appreciate a meal while eating, to listen deeply when a friend speaks, to breathe and feel the body alive. These are ways of grounding ourselves in what is real. The future will unfold according to conditions, but if we are present, we are more prepared to meet it when it comes. By accepting uncertainty, we do not give up on life. On the contrary, we enter into it more fully, with open eyes and a steady heart. So the Buddhist view of life's uncertainty is not meant to frighten us, but to free us. It shows us that change is unavoidable, but suffering from change is not. It shows us that while the river will always flow, we can learn how to swim with its current rather than exhausting ourselves by fighting against it. It shows us that the end of one chapter is always the beginning of another, and that uncertainty itself holds the seed of new possibilities. When we embrace this truth, worry begins to lose its power, because we see that no storm lasts forever and no night is endless. Life may be uncertain, but within that uncertainty lies both challenge and hope, fear and freedom, endings and new beginnings. And with wisdom, we can walk through it with less fear and more trust. If we wish to understand worry more deeply, we must look beneath the surface of restless thoughts and ask where they come from. At the heart of worry lies attachment and fear. These two are like twins that feed each other, and together they create the endless cycle of anxious thoughts that steal our peace. Attachment is our deep clinging to the way we want life to be, while fear is the trembling that arises when we sense that life may not give us what we want. When we put them together, we see the full picture of worry. We cling to a certain outcome, and we are afraid that we will lose it or never reach it. Think about how often our worries are tied to things we value deeply. We worry about money because we are attached to security and comfort. We worry about relationships because we are attached to love, belonging, and stability. We worry about health because we are attached to strength, beauty, and the ability to live as we please. None of these attachments are evil or wrong. They are deeply human desires. But the problem is that life, by its very nature, cannot guarantee them. No matter how much money we earn, it can be lost. No matter how much love we share, people can leave or die. No matter how healthy we are, the body will one day weaken. This gap between what we cling to and the reality that everything changes is the ground where worry grows. Fear rises as soon as we sense this gap. It whispers to us in the night, what if you lose what you love? What if you fail to hold on? What if the future takes away the things that give your life meaning? These fears become seeds that sprout into endless thoughts, and those thoughts wrap around us like vines, pulling us tighter and tighter until we can hardly breathe. Worry is not random. It is the mind's attempt to shield what we are attached to. But because the shield is made of thoughts rather than real protection, it never truly works. Imagine a person who has built their identity around their career. Their job gives them status, respect, and a sense of self-worth. Deep down, they are attached to the idea that I am someone because of my success. When uncertainty comes, perhaps the company is struggling or younger workers are rising, they begin to worry. They imagine losing their position, and along with it, their very sense of identity. This fear may not even be spoken out loud, but it gnaws at them inside. The worry is not only about money or stability, it is about who they believe they are. This shows us how deeply attachment fuels fear. When we cling not only to possessions, but to roles and identities, any threat feels like the ground shaking beneath our feet. Another example is the parent who worries constantly about their children. On the surface, this seems like pure love, and in many ways it is. But beneath it, there is also a deep attachment, the desire for the child to be safe, happy, and successful, always. Since no parent can control every aspect of a child's life, fear arises. The parent imagines countless dangers, from accidents to failures to heartbreaks, and worry takes root. The love is genuine, but the attachment to outcomes creates endless anxiety. Here we see again that worry is born, not from care itself, but from clinging to how things must turn out. The more tightly we hold on, the more fragile we feel. When life does not fit our expectations, fear surges. Worry then becomes a constant companion, always whispering that disaster is just around the corner. We may think that by worrying, we are protecting ourselves, but in reality, we are only tightening the grip of attachment. It is like clutching sand in our fist. The tighter we squeeze, the faster it slips through our fingers. Worry shows us our deepest fears: fear of losing control, fear of losing love, fear of losing safety, and ultimately, fear of losing ourselves. This does not mean we must give up love, dreams, or care for our lives. It means that to worry less, we must gently loosen our grip. When we recognize that everything we hold dear is subject to change, our hearts may tremble at first, but slowly we learn to love without clinging, to work without fearing loss, to care without drowning in anxiety. We begin to see that life is not ours to own, but ours to experience. We cannot stop change, but we can stop making change into an enemy. At the deepest level, worry reveals our fear of impermanence. We do not want to face the truth that everything passes, so we cling harder, and in clinging harder, we create more worry. The irony is that when we finally accept impermanence, worry begins to fade. If we know in our hearts that nothing can be fully controlled, we stop exhausting ourselves with endless what-ifs. We begin to live more freely, appreciating what is here rather than tormenting ourselves over what might disappear. So when we ask, why do I worry so much? The honest answer is this: because we are attached and we are afraid. This is not a personal failure. It is the condition of the human mind. But it is also a condition that can be understood and transformed. By seeing clearly how attachment and fear fuel worry, we take the first step toward loosening their hold. And as we loosen them, even just a little, we discover a lighter way to live. The things we love can still be loved. The goals we pursue can still be pursued. But the chains of worry no longer bind us so tightly. In this space of understanding, peace slowly grows. Understanding the roots of worry is important, but understanding alone does not bring peace. What makes Buddhist wisdom so valuable is that it does not stop at describing the problem. It offers practical tools that can be applied in daily life. These tools are not complicated rituals or distant philosophies. They are simple ways of looking at life and training the mind so that worry loses its power. They do not demand that we escape from the world or reject our responsibilities. Instead, they invite us to face life as it is, with a clearer heart and a steadier mind. In the middle of hard times, these tools become like lamps that help us walk through the dark. One of the most powerful tools is mindfulness. To worry less, we must learn to come back to the present moment. Worry always pulls us into the future. It is made of what-if thoughts. But when we are mindful, we place our attention on what is happening right here and now. This does not mean ignoring the future or refusing to plan. It simply means not drowning in imagined scenarios, while forgetting the reality before us. If you sit quietly and bring your awareness to your breathing, or to the feeling of your body resting on the chair, you notice that in this moment, you are safe. The future may be uncertain, but right now you are here, alive, breathing. This simple recognition can interrupt the storm of worry. With practice, mindfulness becomes a habit. When the mind starts running toward fear, we gently guide it back to the present, where life is actually taking place. By anchoring ourselves in the here and now, we reduce the space where worry can grow. Another tool is what might be called right understanding, or seeing things more clearly. Much of our worry is built on distorted views. We imagine that problems will last forever, that we are powerless, or that the worst possible outcome is certain. Right understanding cuts through these illusions. It reminds us that everything is temporary, that difficulties rise and fall according to conditions, and that we have more strength than we think. Consider the farmer who looks at the sky and sees dark clouds. A worried mind might say, "What if the storm destroys everything? What if nothing grows?" But a clear mind understands. Storms come and go. Crops may suffer, but can also recover, and life will continue to unfold in ways beyond our control. By seeing conditions as they are, rather than exaggerating them through fear, we free ourselves from unnecessary suffering. This kind of wisdom does not remove uncertainty, but it changes our relationship with it. Compassion is another essential tool. Worry often narrows our world, turning all of our attention inward on our own fears. Compassion opens that world again. When we turn our hearts toward the suffering of others, we realize we are not alone. Everyone faces uncertainty, loss, and struggle. In this shared experience, we find a sense of connection that softens our own fear. If we practice sending thoughts of kindness to ourselves and to others, wishing safety, peace, and courage, we begin to shift the emotional climate inside us. Instead of being filled with anxious energy, the heart fills with warmth. Compassion does not make problems disappear, but it gives us the resilience to face them without breaking. It replaces the sharpness of fear with the softness of care. Perhaps the most transformative tool is learning to let go. Letting go does not mean giving up or ignoring responsibilities. It means recognizing that we cannot control everything and choosing not to carry what is beyond our power. Think of a person trying to hold tightly to every detail of life. The result is exhaustion, because life is too vast to be managed by a single will. Letting go is the art of loosening the grip. It is the courage to say, "I will do what I can, but I will not torture myself over what I cannot." This is not weakness, but wisdom. A monk may live with only a few possessions, not because he rejects life, but because he has discovered that peace grows when the heart is not weighed down by constant clinging. In the same way, we can learn to release our desperate need for control, and in that release, discover freedom from worry. To bring these tools into daily life, we do not need to retreat to mountains or monasteries. We can begin with small steps. Each time we notice worry rising, we pause and breathe, bringing the mind back to the present. Each time fear exaggerates a situation, we remind ourselves that conditions change and no storm lasts forever. Each time we feel trapped in our own concerns, we turn outward with compassion, offering kindness to someone else. And each time we feel overwhelmed by the weight of control, we practice letting go, trusting that life will unfold in ways we cannot always predict. These are not grand gestures, but small and steady practices that, over time, change the way we meet life. The strength of these tools is that they are both simple and profound. They do not deny the reality of suffering, but they prevent suffering from multiplying unnecessarily. They do not promise that Life will be easy, but they make us stronger when life is hard. When used together, mindfulness, clear understanding, compassion, and letting go, they create a way of living that is lighter, calmer, and more awake. They remind us that while we cannot stop the waves of change, we can learn to surf them with grace. And so, when we ask how to worry less in hard times, the answer is not to push worry away with force, nor to pretend that life is without risk. The answer is to bring these tools into our hearts and let them reshape the way we meet uncertainty. In doing so, we discover that the mind has far more freedom than we imagined. Worry loses its grip, not because life has become certain, but because we have learned how to live wisely in the middle of uncertainty. That is the gift of these practical tools, and that is the beginning of real peace. It is one thing to admire wisdom from afar, and another thing to let it shape the way we live each day. When life is calm and smooth, it is easy to speak about mindfulness, compassion, or letting go. But the true test comes when the ground beneath us shakes, when bills pile up, when illness arrives without warning, when people we love disappoint us, or when our own hearts feel restless and afraid. It is in those moments that wisdom must leave the pages of books and the mouths of teachers and enter the rhythm of our ordinary daily life. The great beauty of Buddhist wisdom is that it was never meant to stay as theory. It was always designed to be lived, step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment, in the middle of whatever circumstances we face. Applying wisdom in hard times begins with small choices. When worry rises in the morning before the day has even begun, we can pause and gently redirect our mind. Instead of allowing the mind to spin with fears about what might go wrong, we can ground ourselves in one simple truth. Right now, I am alive, and I have this day in front of me. This does not erase the challenges that await, but it gives us a foundation to meet them without being consumed by fear before we even start. Throughout the day, this practice of returning to the present can become like a thread we hold on to, something that steadies us as we walk through storms. Each time the mind leaps ahead into what if, we bring it back with the reminder. What is needed right now? This simple question cuts through the fog of worry and anchors us in action. Wisdom also teaches us to be realistic about effort. In hard times, we often add pressure by believing we must fix everything immediately. We think, if I do not solve all these problems now, everything will collapse. But the truth is that life rarely works this way. Conditions shift. Gradually, change takes time, and many things are outside of our control. What we can do is take one step, then another, then another. If money is short, we can make one decision today to spend wisely, rather than drowning in panic about months ahead. If health is fragile, we can take one walk, eat one nourishing meal, or rest for 1 hour, instead of worrying endlessly about the future of the body. This step-by-step living is not laziness, it is practical wisdom. It keeps us from collapsing under the weight of the impossible demand to control the future. Another way to apply wisdom is in our relationships. Hard times often strain families, friendships, and workplaces. Worry makes us irritable, quick to anger, and harsh in our words. Wisdom reminds us that others are also struggling, and that kindness can reduce the burden for everyone. Instead of releasing our anxiety through blame or criticism, we can choose patience. Instead of snapping at a loved one, we can take a breath and speak gently. Each act of kindness becomes not only a gift to others, but also a medicine for our own restless mind. When we act with compassion, our hearts soften, and worry loses its sharpness. Even small gestures, a smile, a word of encouragement, a willingness to listen, can transform the atmosphere of a home or a workplace, making the hard times easier to carry together. Applying wisdom also means rethinking what success looks like. In a culture that values constant achievement and control, we often feel like failures when life does not go according to plan. But wisdom shows us a different way. Success is not always about winning, earning, or fixing. Sometimes success is simply keeping the heart steady in a storm. Sometimes it is refusing to be crushed by fear, even when the future is uncertain. Sometimes it is waking up each morning with the courage to take one more step, even if we cannot see the end of the road. When we redefine success in this way, we stop torturing ourselves with impossible standards and we begin to see strength where we once saw weakness. Daily application of wisdom can be as practical as creating moments of quiet. Even in a busy life, we can carve out small spaces to sit still, breathe, and reconnect with our inner stability. Just 5 minutes of silence in the morning or before sleep can calm the nervous system and reduce the grip of worry. Over time, this quiet practice becomes like a well we can draw from whenever life feels overwhelming. It reminds us that peace is not something we must chase in the future. It is something we can touch, even now, in the middle of difficulty. Finally, applying wisdom in hard times means trusting the process of life. No matter how much we plan or prepare, there will always be events outside our control. The wisdom of letting go teaches us not to waste energy resisting reality. This does not mean giving up. It means doing what we can with sincerity and care, while releasing the illusion that we can shape every outcome. A farmer plants seeds, waters them, and protects them as best he can. But he cannot command the rain or the sun. In the same way, we act responsibly in our lives, but we also learn to bow to the larger forces that guide existence. This trust in the unfolding of life gives us space to breathe. It loosens the knot of constant worry and replaces it with patience and openness. When wisdom is applied in this way, daily life itself becomes the practice. Hard times no longer feel like punishment or misfortune, but like the very ground where strength, patience, and clarity grow. We discover that worry is not a permanent enemy, but a teacher showing us where our hearts still cling and where we can let go. Step by step, day by day, we learn to live with more balance. And in that balance, we discover a quiet freedom, an inner stability that no storm can destroy. Stories often carry wisdom more deeply than theories or lists of advice. They touch the heart, they stay in memory, and they remind us that we are not alone in our struggles. When we look at the lives of others, whether from history, tradition, or simple everyday people, we begin to see how worry can be transformed. These illustrations show us that the path of wisdom is not abstract, but real, lived, and available to anyone who chooses to walk it. There is an old story of a king who could never rest. Though he had wealth, power, and armies, his mind was consumed with worry. What if enemies attacked? What if his treasure was stolen? What if people betrayed him? He asked a wise teacher to give him peace. The teacher handed him a cup of water and said, "Hold it carefully and walk around the garden without spilling a drop." The king, nervous, focused only on the cup. He returned without losing a single drop, proud of his achievement. The teacher then asked, "While you were holding the cup, did you worry about your enemies or your treasures?" The king admitted he had not thought of them at all. The teacher said, "In the same way, if you keep your mind steady on what truly matters, your worries will fade. They only grow when you feed them with attention." This story reminds us that worry is often a problem of misplaced focus. When we anchor our attention in what is important and present, the endless spinning of fear loosens its grip. Another illustration comes from a poor farmer. One year, his horse ran away, and the neighbors said, "What bad luck." But the farmer simply replied, "Maybe." A few days later, the horse returned, bringing with it several wild horses. The neighbors exclaimed, "What good fortune." Again, the farmer said, "Maybe." Later, his son tried to tame one of the wild horses and broke his leg. The neighbors cried, "How terrible." Once more, the farmer replied, "Maybe." Not long after, soldiers came to the village to take young men for war, but the son was spared because of his broken leg. The neighbors sighed, "How lucky." The farmer simply said, "Maybe." This simple story shows the wisdom of not rushing to label events as entirely good or bad. Worry thrives when we believe a difficult moment must lead to disaster. But the truth is that life unfolds in ways we cannot fully see, and often what seems like a curse today can become a blessing tomorrow. The farmer's calm acceptance reflects a heart that refuses to be trapped by constant worry about what might come next. There is also the story of a woman whose child had died. She was overcome with grief and worry, unable to accept the loss. In her desperation, she sought a wise teacher and begged for a cure. The teacher told her to bring a handful of mustard seeds from a household that had never experienced death. She went from door to door, asking each family, but everywhere she went, She heard stories of loss, parents, children, siblings, friends. After visiting many homes, she realized that death touches every life. Though her grief did not vanish overnight, her worry began to soften. She saw that she was not singled out by fate, but part of a larger human story. This understanding gave her the strength to let go of her desperate clinging and begin to heal. The story reveals that wisdom does not always erase pain, but it changes how we carry it. Knowing that suffering is shared lightens the burden of personal worry. Even in ordinary daily life, small stories reveal the power of wisdom. Think of someone facing financial hardship. They may spend sleepless nights imagining the worst: homelessness, hunger, total failure. Yet when they begin to take small steps, like cooking at home instead of spending outside, or asking for help when needed, they discover that life is not as hopeless as their worry suggested. They may not become wealthy, but they find stability and resilience. Their worry shrinks, not because the problems vanish, but because they learn to act wisely instead of drowning in fear. These everyday illustrations remind us that wisdom is not distant or reserved for monks and sages. It belongs to anyone who chooses to live with patience, clarity, and courage. Perhaps one of the most powerful images is that of the river. A worried person stands on the bank, afraid of being swept away by the current of life. They try to stop the water with their hands, but of course the river keeps flowing, and they only exhaust themselves. Wisdom teaches us not to fight the river, but to learn how to float. By letting go of the desperate struggle to control everything, we find that the current can carry us. We still face bends and rapids, but we are no longer at war with the flow. Worry comes from the belief that we must stop the river. Wisdom comes from learning to move with it. These stories and illustrations show that wisdom is not about escaping life or pretending problems do not exist. It is about shifting how we meet them. The king learned to focus his mind. The farmer accepted uncertainty. The grieving mother saw that loss is universal. The ordinary person facing hardship discovered strength in small steps. And the river reminds us to release our frantic grip. Each story carries the same message. Worry loses its power when wisdom enters the heart. In hard times, remembering these images and examples can be like carrying lanterns through the dark. They remind us that countless people before us have faced storms, and they found ways not just to survive, but to grow in strength, clarity, and peace. If they could do it, so can we. Our own lives can become part of these living stories, showing others that even in the most difficult moments, it is possible to worry less and live with wisdom. As we arrive at the end of this reflection on how to worry less in hard times, it becomes clear that the wisdom of the Buddha is not distant, abstract, or locked away in temples and scriptures. It is living, breathing guidance for how to carry ourselves in the storms of life. Every one of us knows what it feels like to be caught in worry, to have the mind racing into dark futures, to feel the heart grow heavy with fear and restlessness. We cannot avoid hardship, but what we can transform is the way we respond. The essence of Buddhist wisdom is not to promise us a life free from change, but to offer us tools and insights so that change does not destroy our peace. It teaches us that suffering comes not from the events themselves, but from how the mind clings, resists, and imagines. When we learn to meet life with clarity, patience, and compassion, worry loses its power over us. We have seen that worry grows from craving certainty in a world that is always shifting. It arises when we try to hold on tightly to people, possessions, or outcomes as if they could be made permanent. The Buddha's insight was to see that impermanence is not an enemy, but the very nature of life. When we accept this truth, the grip of fear loosens. We understand that what comes will also go, and that nothing is fixed forever. This acceptance does not make us passive, but it frees us from wasting our energy on the impossible task of controlling everything. With that freedom, we can act more wisely, take care of what is in our hands, and release what is beyond our reach. We have also seen that mindfulness is a powerful medicine. Worry drags us into the future, but mindfulness anchors us in the present. In the present moment, we are usually safe. We are breathing, alive, and capable of facing what is. Here, by returning again and again to this truth, We weaken the habit of drowning in what if. In daily life, mindfulness is not something we practice only on a cushion. It is something we can bring to walking, eating, speaking, or listening. Each time we return to the present, we step out of the prison of worry and into the freedom of now. Compassion, too, is an antidote to worry. Fear narrows the heart, but compassion expands it. When we turn our attention to the suffering of others, we recognize that we are not alone in facing uncertainty. Everyone carries burdens. By wishing peace for ourselves and for others, by acting kindly even in small ways, we create a field of warmth that reduces anxiety and strengthens resilience. Compassion turns worry into connection, and connection brings strength. Perhaps most importantly, Buddhist wisdom invites us to let go, not of life, but of our desperate need to control every part of it. Letting go is not defeat, it is trust in the natural unfolding of life. We still act with care and responsibility, but we stop exhausting ourselves with battles we cannot win. Like the person who learns to float in the river instead of fighting the current, we discover a new kind of freedom. Life still has challenges, but we no longer drown in them. We learn to move with the flow, and in that movement, we find peace. In hard times, applying these teachings is not always easy. The mind will return to old habits, worry will arise again and again, and there will be days when we feel overwhelmed. But every time we remember even one piece of wisdom, every time we pause, breathe, and come back to the present, every time we choose kindness instead of fear, every time we loosen our grip, just a little, we are practicing. Over time, these small moments accumulate into a new way of living. We may not notice the change immediately, but gradually we realize that we are stronger, calmer, and more steady than before. The storms still come, but they no longer shake us as violently. The final lesson is that peace is not somewhere far away. It is not waiting at the end of a perfect future where all problems are solved. Peace is available here, in the middle of imperfection, in the middle of uncertainty, in the middle of daily struggles. To live with less worry does not mean escaping life. It means engaging life fully with an open heart and a clear mind. It means trusting that even in darkness, there is light to guide us, and that within ourselves we already have the capacity for wisdom and compassion. So, as we walk forward into the unknown, we do not need to ask, how can I make sure nothing bad ever happens? Instead, we can ask, how can I meet whatever happens with steadiness and care? That question changes everything. It shifts our focus from fear of the future to strength in the present. It reminds us that the goal is not to escape life, but to live it well. And when we live in this way, with mindfulness, compassion, clarity, and the courage to let go, worry fades and peace takes its place. This is the gift of Buddhist wisdom. It does not erase the hard times, but it teaches us how to walk through them with dignity and calm. It shows us that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of understanding. And it invites each of us, no matter who we are or where we stand, to discover that peace within ourselves. For in the end, the greatest freedom is not to control life, but to live it without fear.